cold and rainy. You'd think last regatta before the Olympics, most of the talk would be about what was happening out in the water, but in fact it probably isn't. A lot of the day I spent yesterday talking about stuff that was going on in British rowing. The allegations of bullying culture in the British women's squad particularly, which surfaced as a result of Laura Fell's article and the allegations that Emily Taylor made, a former rower in the British Women's 8, regarding how she was dropped from the crew in 2012 and the culture that existed in the squad then. And that was all very media. Journalists were interviewing Paul Thompson from the Telegraph and the Times here yesterday. I thought it was good of him to front up. But it is a major issue for British rowing, not least because I think if anybody feels bullied or there are possible allegations of bullying, it needs to be thoroughly investigated. British rowing is meant to be a sport that is a beacon for the world, fantastic system, shows the world what to do, and it can't be seen to have these kind of allegations hanging over it, even if it is 4 years on, and perhaps even if it is from an athlete who understandably feels particularly hard done by in that she wasn't selected for the games. So this is something that has to be resolved. Anyone who's been bullied will know it's an incredibly terrible thing. Certainly it's something I've felt both at school and in my professional life. So it's something that needs to be addressed. It also needs to be addressed because the chair of British Rowing, Anne-Marie Phelps, is leading an inquiry into allegations of whether it's bullying or poor treatment of female athletes in British cycling, but she's leading an external inquiry, an independent inquiry into that sport. I think she's a great person to do that, but it's clearly highly inconvenient if in her own sport there's allegations that female athletes have been suffering. So the sport has chosen to put out an independent, or British Rowing has chosen to put out an internal inquiry. So British Rowing will run the inquiry to look at Emily Taylor's allegations. So I think there are several things around this. I do think on the surface it seems like a male-female thing. Paul Thompson as a male coach, Emily is a female athlete, and the culture of, perhaps someone who might tend to be over-dominating, come across as a bully. I think we need to take gender out of this issue. I think it's really important that both male and female athletes can keep safe in a culture. I also think it's really important that both sides of the issue are heard. I do understand that there were issues with Paul and the way he related to women before London 2012. I understand that athletes, I think it was Anna Watkins, did take these issues up with Director of Performance, David Tanner and Dialis. I understand these issues were addressed. I understand Paul Thompson's behaviour changed, and I think that is well documented in the past, and no doubt that will come to light. Specifically, I think if this inquiry reports, I would urge it to make sure that an athlete and a chief coach are not alone together in a room. A lot of Emily's allegations consist of stuff that happened in a room that nobody can ever know the truth of because there were just two people there. And clearly I think an athlete, if they're going to hear bad news or whatever news, ought to be able to have somebody in the room with them, and that should happen as a matter of course. Also, there ought to be two people from British Rowing in the same room, and that's to protect the coach as well as protect the athlete. It's normal practice in the workplace, and I think that's what should happen here. Emily's made allegations about the appeals process, that she was being manipulated, blackmail, whatever you like to call it, not to appeal. The thing with appeals in British Rowing is it's kind of the nuclear option. It's such a big deal that really, there are very few. From my perspective, appeals ought to be a normal part of the selection procedure, part and parcel of the process, and indeed coaches and chief coaches ought to encourage athletes to appeal because that's their right and that's what should happen to them. So I think that's really important. I think that's another thing to come out of the process. What I would say though is quite clearly athletes male and female need to be able to give information openly to any inquiry or investigation, and really I do think that's best done with an independent inquiry. I think the advantages of that are British Rowing would think, and I do think British Rowing has in many ways got the holistic interests of its athletes at heart. I think it has done things to address the danger of bullying culture. I know when you have chief coaches there in situ for a long time, you have to be very careful about this. So I think you need an independent inquiry for people that can speak up for Tomo and say, well, this is the culture, it's appropriate to a high performance environment, and other athletes perhaps who may feel less comfortable and say, well, you know, I don't think this type of relationship has any place in our sport, like Emily Taylor has obviously done. To do that, an inquiry, I believe, needs to be independent so that British Rowing can rightly take its place as one of the beacons of excellence in our sport, and we can all get back and concentrate out there to what's on the water.